I am Dr. Mitch Harlan, and welcome to the Truth Talks podcast. As we all face the reality that inclusion and equality are a must in our society, June is also a time to celebrate the LGBTQ community with Pride Month. Listen in this week as we sit down with a teenage girl who had to have one of the most difficult conversations of her life with her parents, telling them she is gay. Listen in as she discusses her struggles and inspirations for coming out. I'm Dr. Mitch Harlan, and welcome to the Truth Talks podcast. Today's guest is Taylor, and we are telling your story of coming out. How are you doing, Taylor?
Pretty good. How are you?
You were just shaking your head like it's a story, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to kind of focus in on this because you're a young person.
Right.
We know this is a big topic, and I've had the privilege of knowing you for a long time. Mm-hmm. And the purpose of our podcast is to bring real life stories so other people can learn. They can really gain a lot of knowledge, what we call experiential knowledge. And this is not just for people your age seeing your story, but it's also for us older adults that we may not have as much exposure to it. And we really want to hit today, the whole entire podcast is your coming out story, because we feel after discussing with you, that was the hardest part of your story.
Yeah, it was.
You agree with that completely?
Yeah, it was definitely the hardest.
Do you also feel like people who you are surrounded with that are in the same position, would you also agree that it was probably their hardest part of their story?
For sure.
Oh, then let's jump right into it. So the first thing I have to ask is, do you feel like you were born this way?
Oh, yeah. I think, you're born who you are. You're born gay, straight, transgender, whatever you might be. That's who you are, and that's who you were born to be. There
was no doubt in your mind. At what age did you feel like you knew?
I was around 12 when I started to, notice things were a little bit different. When I was younger, I was dressing like a boy, hat backwards, long shorts, basketball shorts. I was always playing with boys, and that's how it always has been. And it's not stereotypical for a girl to do that. So I was like, there's something different.
So you recognized there was something different even before you knew?
Yeah.
Okay, and you had stated that it was what age that you were kind of like, wow, okay, something's really different here?
12.
So 12 years of age, you were like, okay, I'm starting to have an attraction towards females over males.
Right.
And that led you into the idea that, wait a minute, I think it's possibly I'm gay, or did you even know that?
I didn't know that yet.
Okay, so you weren't sitting there thinking, I think I might be gay. You just knew something was different.
Yeah.
At what point did you say, okay, now I know?
It was probably a couple months later.
Oh, so just a couple months.
Yeah, it wasn't long.
Because those emotions were coming up and you were like, pretty sure this is what this is.
Yeah.
Okay. When that happens, now what? You got to come out?
Yeah. I was really scared. I was like, I don't want to have to come out to my parents.
And how long did it take you? At what age did you come out?
3 years. So I was 15.
So for 3 years, you were thinking about coming out?
Yeah.
Okay. And I imagine that there's a lot of anxiety about that?
Oh, a ton of anxiety.
Tell me that emotion. Tell me when you thought and knew that you were gay and you had to come out, tell me what that feeling was like.
It made me sick to my stomach.
Like physically?
Yeah.
Anything else?
I just overwhelmingly anxious and scared and worried. And
something that affected you every day?
Yeah, every day. I couldn't sleep a lot. I was so worried about it.
Affect your personal life, friends' life?
Yeah, I struggled a lot.
And do you believe and attribute that strictly to the idea that you knew you were gay and you had to come out?
Yeah.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
Because I assume that obviously it is a very difficult thing to do, and I would also assume that many, many, many people struggle with the same thing. Is that something that you kind of hear from your peers?
Yeah, everyone's different, but it's always kind of similar, people's experiences.
Well, that's that first big moment.
Right.
That's when you're announcing to the world, no turning back, right? It's like jumping out of an airplane, right? Once you make that step, there's nothing left but the ground. You are hope the chute opens, right?
Right.
Is that kind of that feeling that you got?
I mean, yeah, that was definitely the feeling. I got a lot of denial at the beginning too. I was like, no, like that's not true. Maybe it's just a phase, or maybe it'll go away. Like,
Is that why it took 3 years? You
I
went through all these different emotions?
yeah.
Wow. Tell me about the moment that you decide you're going to tell your parents. Or did you tell anyone else besides them?
I had told a friend of mine. Yes.
Was that a dry run? Like, I'm going to see what they say?
Yeah, kinda. I was like, I can't hold this in anymore.
And it was just a close friend?
Yeah.
Very accepting?
Yeah.
Okay. Were they gay as well?
No.
Okay, so that's important.
Right.
And so when you said it, what was the reaction?
I'll support you. Like, doesn't matter. Like, oh well.
So did that give you confidence?
Oh yeah, it helped a lot.
Well, that's good. Okay, so now let's get into telling mom or dad. Who got it first?
My mom.
Okay, tell me about that.
Well, I had a lot of opportunities, and I got too scared.
And your own mom. Now, I have the benefit of knowing your mom and dad, and I know how easy and laid back they are, but
Right.
you were still that concerned.
Yeah, I was freaking out.
Tell me that emotion.
I was like so anxious, like it just kept escalating. And then once I was ready to tell them or my mom, I was like, no.
You would get close to it, and then you'd be
Yeah.
like, yeah.
Yeah,
How many times did you do that?
probably 20.
So 20 times you went up to the moment where you got ready to say it, and then you just got too anxious, filled up with something, you couldn't do it.
Right.
That has to be a terrible feeling,
Uh-huh.
like crazy, intense.
Oh yeah, very intense.
Okay, well, tell me when you jumped out of the airplane.
Well, one of the times that I went to tell my mom, I was in the car and I was like, hey mom, like, I have to tell you something. And she's like, what's up? And I'm like, oh, I got an A in my class. And she's like, okay, cool. And I was like, darn it.
So literally, it was that intense.
Yeah.
I mean, we're laughing because we know each other,
Right.
but it probably wasn't funny then.
No.
It was just like, oh my God, I can't tell him. So what got you the courage to finally go ahead and take that leap?
Well, I YouTubed a lot of different stories because I was like, I have no idea how I'm going to do this. So I YouTubed, Googled, whatever, just different ways that people have come out to their parents, and it made me realize, like, everyone does it differently, and there's not a right way or wrong way. So I was like, well, I think if I, like, do it visually and I don't have to say anything, it'll make it the easiest for me. So I was like, well, and I tossed around a few different ideas, and I was like, well, maybe I could, like, draw a picture or something of it. And I ended up painting something. It was the flag. And I was like, I'll just show my mom this. So,
Which is this painting here.
right,
Okay, so that's the painting that you did in order to come out.
right.
Okay, so you presented that to her?
So I was like, hey, mom, like, come here. And she's like, okay. And so I gave it to her, and she's like, oh, like, that's cool. And I was like, and she's like, what? And I was like, well, she's like, is that how you feel? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, okay.
So tell me that emotion. I mean, it can't just be like, okay. What was the emotion? Were you like relieved?
I thought I was going to, like, fall over because all this weight just came off my shoulders.
I mean, absolutely noticeable. Like you were just like, oh, I can't imagine it. I know there's been times in my life where there's been a lot of stress, and you finally get through it, and just that unbelievable peace inside you. Is that what you felt?
Yeah. I just felt like I could just take a deep breath now.
For 3 years, though, you
Right.
went through that. Because
Right.
that's the whole idea, again, behind Truth Talks is the reason we love these stories and we like to share these stories. We're going to save somebody 3 years. Would you give them advice to, listen, if this is where you're at, you got to come out at some point. Do it early on so you don't have to absorb all that stress and anxiety.
Yeah, I mean, my advice is just, when you're in a safe environment and, just get it over with. I mean, rip the Band-Aid off. Like, I wish I had ripped the Band-Aid off earlier so I didn't have to deal with it for 3 years. But I know that there's a lot of people that do go a lot longer without saying anything. So
It's true, but I know that costs you a lot.
Yeah.
Because there was a lot of sleepless nights, a little bit of depression type
Right.
stuff. and then just the overall anxiety. I mean, that's something that, again, you could have shaved off a year, shaved off a year and a half. But then again, who knows if you were at that right time, right moment.
Right.
We had talked before in the past, and that moment was kind of like, everybody has to decide on their own. Do you still stand by that? When the right time for them?
I think it's almost like you have to make it the right time. I really don't think there's truly like a concrete, this is the right time. You just got to make it the right time.
So the other 20 times in the vans weren't the right time? You're like, I got an A on my on my deal. That's not the right time.
No.
But when the right time was there, you do it. Mom's
Right.
good. Now
Right.
what?
I got to tell my dad.
Were you like, okay, it worked on my mom, I'm going to do the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, I had the same thought. I waited a couple days to tell my dad. It was very similar. My mom's friends had come over, and they're gay as well, and so I was like, well, if he's fine with them, like, if they're here, then there should be no problem. So we were sitting at dinner, and my mom's like, hey, go get that thing you made, and I was like, oh.
So your own mom threw you under the bus?
She didn't throw me under the bus, but she
totally threw you under the bus.
She pushed me to just do it, which I'm glad, because I would have chickened out.
So was it the same level of anxiety to tell your dad?
Yeah.
Really? So after you told mom,
Right.
and mom was like, okay, yeah, great, we love you, okay.
Right.
You had that weight of the world off your shoulders, but it built back up to tell your dad?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, well then tell me that. Let's go through it again.
So she's like, go get that painting or that thing you made. And I was like, okay. So I went inside and grabbed it, and I sat inside for 5 minutes because I was like, I can't do this. I can't do this. So she came in and she's like, come on. And I was like, okay. So I went outside with the painting, and I just put it on the table, and I said, here, Dad, look at this. And he was like, oh, cool. That's a really good painting. And I kind of said the same thing of, oh, that's kind of how I'm feeling. And he was like, yeah. He was like, I love you, always. That's not going to change.
And then did you have that same thing? Weight of the world's gone?
Yeah, I think almost a little bit more, just because now both of them knew, and it was I could just do my thing. And
I don't want to minimize this, but once your parents know and they're comfortable with you, and you know that nothing changed, they loved you before, they loved you after, and you're kicking your own butt thinking, my God, I wasted a couple years when I could have done this. Does it matter as much what anyone else thinks at that point?
No. I don't know how to explain it, but once, the people closest to you know, it's it doesn't matter. You just don't worry about other people anymore. You just...
I can picture that, and I'm glad you said that, because I think that's how I would kind of picture something like that. So
Yeah.
I'm definitely glad you did it. The question I still have to ask, though, so I've seen you with red hair, real red hair, which actually I really like the red hair because it was like my Kansas City Chiefs. But now we're at, what is that color? What's it called? Teal?
Yeah, teal.
All right, teal. Is that just because you like the hair color, or is it something that also kind of helps open up and you are now comfortable in the whole entire thing?
It definitely just makes me more comfortable. I mean, I like it, a color. It kind of just, symbolizes, me.
Well, that's what I wondered. Is it a fashion statement, or is it something that kind of almost is a welcoming mat? You're like, I'm free, I'm out there,
Yeah.
I'm going to express it this way.
Definitely just so welcoming, hey, this is me,
So it is a little bit of an expression. So it's a little bit of, you like color,
Right.
but it's also a little bit of an expression of who you are
Right.
and what you're about.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. So what would you tell people your age? What would be the biggest message that you would like for them to get?
Just, it's okay to be who you are, and it's, there's nothing wrong with it, and there's no right or wrong feelings. I mean, if you're scared and afraid, that's okay, and just gotta rip the Band-Aid off and just be you. And
for those kids or anyone that is coming out, other than YouTube, is there any groups or anything that they can go to in the event that one of their parents doesn't accept it? Because I've actually done stories in the books that I wrote where there were issues with that, and it is a very complicated thing. And part of the reason that we are telling this story and the reason that we chose you is because you're at that age, you're very honest, you're very open about how this affected you, which we totally appreciate here at True Talks. But we are not just educating people that are just trying to come out, although I think that is our focus on the coming out part, because we don't want anyone to suffer at Truth Talks. Right. But the other thing is we want to educate the people who may be in your parents' age and or grandparents' age to understand the magnitude of what coming out is really about so that we can all be educated in this entire system. And I think you've really nailed that today, and I appreciate that because it's a tough thing because there are certain people that we know aren't going to have quite as good an experience as you did. And so my question is there a network or a group that people can go to get support?
Yeah, I mean, there's tons of, like, social media, like, I know, like, Facebook, Instagram. I know they all have, like, groups that you could find.
Are you on any of those groups?
I'm not, but I just know that there are.
Yeah, okay, good. Because I think that's real important because again, knowing your parents, and I think I want to hammer this home really hard, but I know your parents, they're just super accepting people, great people, and you were still that nervous. Yeah. So I can't imagine those young people that are coming out that they know that they're probably not going to be there. So maybe we'll have producer Chad look up some support groups, something like that, where these people can go and at least feel included and maybe kind of lessen that burden. But Taylor, I thank you so much for this story. I think it's going to help so many people that is a huge decision. There's a lot of stress, a lot of concern, and I appreciate your honesty about how it actually was actually hard on your health before you finally just said, I'm going for it. I love your courage. I know your dad's an artist, and I figured he would probably say something about the size of the mountains compared to the flag or something. But I think that was a great way of coming out. Maybe that's something that other people can do. Yeah. But I loved having you on this show.
Thank you.
I thank you for everything that you've done, and I think you're going to really influence a lot of people.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.